For decades, Mark lived with blindness, but an unforeseen miracle restored his sight. Even with the contagious joy, Mark kept his restored sight a secret, choosing to go back to observing his world. However, in a short period of time, he came across disturbing truths that questioned everything he believed in. After discovering the shocking truth that Mark had been hiding, his children called 911. A husband with blindness regains his sight, but doesn't reveal it to his wife, and he realizes he's been lied to for years. Mark's choice to conceal his restored sight transformed the way he interacted with his surroundings. Without revealing his perspective, he searched the house as usual, his eyes catching details he had long forgotten. He wanted to see if he could identify any changes that hadn't been mentioned. Every noise on the ground seemed more intense, every shadow clearer. The ability to see again seemed like a superpower he needed to safeguard. He began to notice various details that he hadn't noticed before, such as the wear and tear on the curtains and the paint stains on the living room walls. Even the carpet appeared to be more worn and dirty than he remembered. These small details piqued his curiosity even more, leaving him with a mixture of nostalgia and suspicion. His newfound vision had turned ordinary things into objects of intense scrutiny, and he couldn't help wondering what else had been altered. His wife, Emily, didn't notice Mark's new vision and went on with her life as usual. He moved around the house easily, carrying out his daily tasks without any problems. Mark glanced at her, trying hard not to reveal his secret. Emily sang to herself as she cooked, washed, and went about her daily activities. Her contentment seemed genuine, but Mark's distrust persisted, aware that he needed to go further. Mark began to pay more attention to Emily, noticing small changes in their daily routines. He seemed more distracted and less emotional, something he had previously dismissed as a figment of his imagination. Emily drank coffee more calmly, spent more time on phone calls, and appeared restless. He didn't find the same woman he thought he knew. But were these changes real, or was it just his new perspective playing tricks on his mind? Interested, he observed her discreetly during her chores, but didn't notice anything unusual at first. She did her shopping, went to the post office, and even paid a visit to a friend's house. Everything seemed to be in order. Mark stayed in the shadows, making sure he was never too close, but not so far away that he lost sight of her. He was experiencing a combination of guilt and resolve, praying to find out something that would clarify his uncertainties. One morning, Emily was surprised by a cryptic phone call that clearly unsettled her. Mark, who was sitting at the kitchen table, noticed her apprehensive expression as she glanced at him before answering. She didn't say much, but her restless eyes and tense voice caught his attention. Terms like urgent and discretion were left hanging in the air, suggesting that this was a serious matter. Mark's curiosity was aroused, and he was aware that he needed to find out what was making her so anxious. Mark, feigning concern, listened attentively, but could only make out fragmented words like urgent and discretion. Emily's words were whispered, almost like a whisper. As Mark tried to make sense of the call, his heart raced. She nodded affirmatively a few times, her eyes wandering around the room, clearly uneasy. Emily ended the conversation abruptly, her face pale. Without saying anything to Mark, she hurried out of the house, intensifying his suspicions. Mark chose to follow her immediately, remaining hidden. She grabbed her coat and left the door a few moments later, keeping a safe distance. As she went on, her feeling intensified. Emily moved quickly, glancing over her shoulder occasionally, but Mark made an effort to blend in. She followed her through the neighborhood, her heart racing, with no idea of what she might discover. Emily came across a stranger in a remote park and handed him an envelope. Mark watched her from behind a tree, straining to see and hear her. Mark couldn't fully understand the conversation, but the urgency was clear. The stranger, a stocky man in a hoodie, took the envelope and spoke short words with dark expressions. When Emily stepped away, her footsteps were heavy, and Mark felt a wave of unease wash over him. What was Emily's secret? Mark strained to hear their conversation, but the muffled tones prevented him. He moved closer, crouching behind a nearby bench, but the words persisted as unintelligible whispers. The stranger's hand made animated gestures, while Emily shook her head, looking tense. Frustration at not understanding was eating away at him. When he had finished, the man put the envelope in his pocket and walked away quickly. Emily took a deep breath, recovering before returning. Mark was disturbed by the encounter, wondering what secrets Emily might be hiding. He followed her back, keeping his distance. Her every move made him afraid. When they arrived home, Emily walked in with an expression he couldn't decipher. Mark stopped in front of the door, unsure of what action to take next. The images of the secret meeting haunted him, and he was aware that he needed to investigate further. Mark's doubts intensified as he investigated Emily's office at home. Waiting for her to leave a message, he rummaged through her desk cupboards. Carefully examining documents and files, he discovered folders with unfamiliar names and unusual symbols. He pulled out a series of documents, analyzing each page in search of answers. Normally, the workplace was beyond his reach, but the urgency of his suspicions made him lose his caution. Identifies inconsistent financial records and emails indicating confidential communications. His heart raced with every unusual detail. Mark felt his mind racing, as if he were putting together a puzzle that didn't fit. Financial statements with transactions he didn't remember authorizing, and messages from unknown senders filled the screen. There were references to high values, unusual codes, and references to places he had never been. He is intrigued, yet confused, as he analyzes bank statements and notes in search of more clues. He examined receipts, some from luxurious establishments he didn't know she frequented. Each new finding generated more questions, not answers. Emily's handwriting on stickers was scattered across his desk, with cryptic messages and contact numbers. Mark recorded everything he considered the slightest bit dubious. He was aware that he couldn't stop now, not until he knew the truth in its entirety. He identifies a second bank account in Emily's name, with significant and unexplained deposits. Surprised, Mark stares at the screen, unable to understand the numbers. Where was this money obtained? He printed out pages of data, emphasizing dates and amounts. The deposits were frequent and significant, intensifying his fears. Why would Emily hide such a crucial aspect of her finances? Mark began to lose confidence in his wife. Mark begins to assemble the pieces, but the unfinished information leaves him even more perplexed. The records and emails indicated something more far-reaching, but nothing was tangible. The dates and amounts didn't conform to any of the known details of their lives. Each new document he found seemed to add another layer to the puzzle, rather than solving it. His attempt to connect the dots was like reaching for a cigarette, always just out of reach. His trust in Emily began to disintegrate as doubts about her fidelity arose in his mind. Each discovery deepened the distance between them, turning love into mistrust. He no longer had the same ability to look at her. Mark avoided looking at him during meals, making their conversations harsher. He revisited the years they had shared, looking for signs of the past that he had missed. Uncertainty settled in her heart, erasing years of joy. While Mark was fighting his suspicions, Emily began to behave unusually at home. She seemed more introverted. Her conversations were full of incomplete answers and detours. She double-checked the locks, hid her cell phone, and moved with a cautious tone. Mark watched her closely, taking note of all her unusual attitudes. The house, which had once been a haven of love, became a battlefield of suspicion. His observations only confirmed that something was fundamentally wrong. She answers more calls late at night and leaves the house at unusual times, which intensifies Mark's restlessness. Emily whispered to him on the phone before she left. She drove to an unknown part of the city. Mark's worry intensified as he looked at his watch during her absences. One evening, he followed her again, his heart burdened with bad news. Mark followed her, determined to uncover the truth, even if it ruined his universe. One night, driven by apprehension, Mark led Emily to an unknown building on the other side of town. He kept a safe distance, walking cautiously and hiding in the darkness. Emily appeared nervous, looking over her shoulder as she walked, but she didn't notice Mark following her. The building appeared old and decaying, far from the bustling city center. At the thought of Emily, Mark's heart raced. He watches as she enters the building, remaining inside for several hours. Mark left the vehicle on the other side of the street, his eyes fixed on the entrance. The minutes turned into hours, each one increasing her fear and suspicion. She conceived several scenarios, each more alarming than the last. The street was empty. The windows of the building were dark. Emily's prolonged absence tormented his mind, and he found himself caught between confronting Emily and unraveling her mysteries. Mark waited outside, filled with anxiety and uncertainty. Every noise, every movement in the shadows made him anxious. His heart pounded, every moment dragged with pain. What could Emily have been doing in that place for so long? He questioned his own mental sanity, wondering if such monitoring was necessary. However, the fear of what he might find kept him firmly in his position. The anticipation was overwhelming, the silence suffocating, intensifying his inner turmoil. When she returned, she appeared even more cautious, carefully avoiding any questions about her whereabouts. Mark watched her as she passed him, his countenance an expression of control. She entered the house quietly, exhibiting a cautious demeanor. He led her inside, trying to decipher any signs or indications. However, Emily was a closed book, her behavior generating more questions. Every lack of response from her intensified his growing sense of suspicion. Mark chooses to confront Emily indirectly, questioning her recent conduct. At dinner, he chats casually about her nightly absences and phone calls. "You've been going out a lot lately." "Is everything all right?" he asks, trying hard to keep his expression calm. Emily stared at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. He shrugged, dismissing the question with a disinterested nod. "I just sent a few messages and met some friends," she replied, but Mark sensed something hidden in her words. He asks about the late-night calls and the constant absences. "Who do you call so late?" "It seems a bit unusual to me," Mark insists in a firm voice. Emily blinked with a slight trace of irritation. Her sarcastic replies did little to reassure him. "It's usually professional questions," she replied imprecisely, "and occasionally family questions." Every answer seemed designed to distract rather than enlighten. Mark was on the verge of losing patience, but managed to control his frustrations. Emily's answers are imprecise and evasive, which only intensifies your suspicion. "Why don't you express yourself directly?" Mark tried again, frustration flooding his voice. Emily let out a sigh, her face becoming more rigid. "It's complicated, and I don't want to lead you into it," she said gently. Her words hung in the air, imprecise and meaningless. Mark felt an increase in her agitation, the enigma surrounding her becoming more intense. Every half-truth she provided only generated more doubts. She puts herself on the defense, accusing Mark of being paranoid and domineering. "Why have you suddenly become so insecure?" Emily replies, her voice full of anger. The gulf between them widened, pushing them further apart. "You've been acting paranoid and controlling, questioning my every move." Her sharp words permeated the room, generating a tense conflict. Mark was about to reply, but the sight of her closed fists and burning eyes stopped him. Their relationship became agitated, marked by constant arguments and silent meals. During meals, they exchanged glances, each feeling the weight of unspoken words. Conversations evolved into clashes, and silence became their battleground. The warmth and ease that had once characterized their connection faded, giving way to suspicion and hostility. Mark found himself walking on eggshells, anticipating Emily's next defensive reaction. The house, once filled with laughter, now resounded with the tension of distrust and unresolved conflicts. Mark felt disoriented and anxious about the truth. Every day was a battle, with the unresolved conflict undermining his sanity. He noticed an ever-widening chasm between them, with his unanswered questions. The empty dinners, cold disinterest, and constant uncertainty tormented him. Mark yearned for the truth, even if it meant facing a reality he wasn't ready for. Desperation made him act, determined to unravel Emily's mysteries. Driven by his rising paranoia, Mark hires a private investigator to monitor Emily and uncover the truth. He discovers an investigator through an internet search, quickly arranging to meet at a nearby cafe. At the cafe, Mark voices his suspicions, sharing details about Emily's strange attitudes and her late-night phone calls. The investigator, an elderly man named Tom, listened carefully and wrote down his observations. Mark felt a spark of hope when he discovered that yet another individual was now investigating Emily's actions. The researcher presented a report full of intriguing findings, including his interactions with various strangers and the persistence of large monetary deposits. Mark listened attentively as Tom organized photos and notes on the kitchen table. Each image showed Emily in different situations, whether exchanging envelopes or conversing in low tones. Tom presented bank records showing frequent and unexplained deposits. Mark broke out in a cold sweat as he realized how intense Emily's hidden life seemed to be. These revelations have a significant impact on Mark, further damaging his marriage. He began to run away from Emily, with mistrust growing in his eyes. Every shared meal became a silent battleground, full of unspoken accusations. Even afternoons, once shared in warm company, became cold and distant. Mark's mind was flooded with images of the photographs Tom had shown him. The burden of the truth seemed almost unbearable, obscuring all his thoughts and interactions with Emily. The researcher proposes that Emily may be involved in illegal actions, which intensifies Mark's concerns. "I can't guarantee it, but the meetings and large sums of money are warning signs," said Thomas, with a serious expression. Mark snuggled down, stunned by the consequences. His mind ran through the darkest scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. Could Emily be involved in some wrongdoing? Mark resonated with the investigator's words, which intensified with each passing day. Insecure and desperate, Mark decides that he needs to solve the problem on his own. He felt an intense desire to uncover the whole truth, to leave nothing unanswered. Suspicion continually consumed him, pushing him even further into action. He devoted his evenings to planning his next actions, defining the times and places where he could discreetly observe Emily. He was aware that this could further widen the distance between them, but the urgency for answers overcame his fear. Mark starts secretly recording Emily's phone calls and outings in order to gather solid evidence. He placed small cameras around the house and a voice recorder next to the telephone. Every press of the record button felt like a breakthrough in infidelity, but he couldn't stop it. He spent days painstakingly reviewing the recordings, looking for any hint of a clue. Every stifled conversation, every whispered word became a possible clue to uncovering the truth. It identifies encrypted messages and secret meetings, but the underlying purpose remains unclear. Emily's dialogues were full of codes and references that were incomprehensible to Mark. He recorded words and times, trying to identify patterns. The frustration of not understanding grew, each meeting and call generating more questions. Her footage showed her interacting with individuals in remote places, exchanging envelopes and packages, but their meaning remained hidden. One day, while reviewing the recordings, she found a passage that spoke of the truth about your husband. The words were delicate but unintelligible. Mark felt a strong heartbeat as he rewound and repeated the segment several times. The reality about your husband. The sentence hung in the air like a dark omen. What did Emily know that he didn't? Her mind was filled with alternatives, each one more terrifying than the last. This could be the starting point for everything. Mark's heart races as he confronts the consequences of this statement. He replays the recording countless times, scrutinizing every word and tone. What truth could Emily be hiding about him? The thought of an unknown aspect of her life that he didn't know about made him anxious. She felt the weight of the unknown physically, a tight knot forming in her chest. Mark was aware that he needed to delve deeper, even with the fear that haunted him. Ask yourself what secrets Emily has about him and why they are of such importance. Mark's thoughts went round and round, creating various possible scenarios. Was Emily aware of something in his past that he had forgotten? Or is there a segment of her life that he never had the chance to know about? The relevance of this hidden truth consumed him, leading him to question every memory and behavior. Mark felt as if he were living the story of a stranger, anxious to find out what his real role was. As Mark realizes that he is dealing with more than simple infidelity, his feelings of betrayal and fear intensify. Each piece of evidence reinforces his suspicions, leading him to question his marital relationship. The evidence points to mysteries far more intricate and sinister than he could have anticipated. The barriers of trust that Mark has established over the years seem to be crumbling, leaving him increasingly alone and anxious for the truth. In one of his secret searches, Mark comes across an old family album that Emily had hidden away. The album was hidden under a pile of dirty books in the closet. With curiosity and the expectation of achieving some clarity, Mark pulled it out with trembling hands. The worn cover indicated that it had been there for a long time. Mark took a deep breath before unraveling the album, ready for what he might discover. As he flipped through the pages, he noticed pictures of people he didn't know and places he'd never been. Mark frowned in amazement as he turned each page. It felt like he was contemplating someone else's memories. The bright images showed faces and destinations completely unknown to him. The tight feeling in his stomach intensified as he realized that these images could unravel the enigmas surrounding Emily's recent behavior. One image in particular piques his interest. Emily standing next to a man who looks a lot like him. Mark stood watching, his heart racing. The resemblance was unusual, but he was sure he had never made that image before. The man, wrapping his arm around Emily, was wearing a smile that now seemed almost debauched. As Mark examined the photograph in more detail, his mind wavered. Who was this individual? Why did he look so much like him? Mark finds himself perplexed and unsettled, questioning his own memories and identity. Had he simply forgotten to take that photograph? The hypothesis seemed unbelievable. But so did the photograph in his hands. His mind churned as he tried to recall any instant that might shed light on the situation. Every void in his memory seemed like another infidelity. He noticed the foundations of his world shifting, wondering if he hadn't inadvertently led a life of falsehoods. He wonders if Emily has been hiding some aspect of her past, or if there is something darker at play. The photograph constantly disturbed him, making him question all his certainties. He examined his memories, looking for clues or hints that could make sense of the chaos. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that the puzzle was more complex than just betrayal. Emily may have been hiding deeper secrets than he realized. The revelation shook Mark to the core, leaving him yearning for answers. He felt as if the ground had been taken away from him, holding him to stability. The pain in his heart was a combination of betrayal and confusion. Mark, determined to uncover the truth, chose to investigate Emily's dark past. As he discovered more, the less he recognized his own existence. He needed to unite the fragments of this disintegrating reality. Mark's health began to deteriorate due to the stress caused by his suspicions and secret investigations. The sleepless nights, filled with anxiety and endless questioning, began to manifest themselves. He began to experience dizziness and severe headaches. The continuous tension took its toll on his well-being. His incessant search for the truth intensified, and his body struggled to follow it. However, the need to unravel Emily's mysteries took precedence over his own health concerns. He began to experience intense headaches and bouts of vertigo. Whenever his vision became blurred, fear took over. The pain behind his eyes was constant, almost like a protest by his body against the stress. Mark tried to overcome the discomfort, but his physical condition made it more and more challenging. Even though he was in pain, he couldn't stop searching for answers. He was close to a breakthrough and couldn't allow himself to pause. Emily, worried, suggests that he go to the doctor, but Mark refuses, afraid that she will lose her sight. "Mark, you look terrible." "Maybe you should see someone," says Emily, with a worried look on her face. Mark shook his chin. "I'm fine, really," he said, looking away from her. He didn't want Emily to find out the truth about his vision, at least not until he found out what she was hiding. His denial only intensified her apprehension. He chooses to carry on, even when his physical condition worsens. Mark was aware of the dangers, but the need to discover the truth drove him on. Every move was a challenge. Headaches and dizziness almost prevented him from continuing. Disregarding Emily's pleas to seek medical help, he continued his research with grim resolution. Time was running out, and he felt the burden of every hour that passed. His desperation makes him confront one of the strangers Emily met, asking for an explanation. Mark followed the trail of another encounter between Emily and an unidentified man one night. "What's going on between you and your wife?" Waiting until Emily was out of earshot, he suddenly approached the stranger. Mark's voice was firm but urgent. The visitor looked surprised, evidently unprepared for such a direct confrontation. Mark was aware that he couldn't back down at the moment. The enigmatic man, surprised, reveals little but suggests that Mark is closer to the truth than he anticipated. "Look, you don't know what you've gotten yourself into," says the man anxiously as he looks around. "Leave that aside for your own benefit." Mark experienced a flood of fear and anger. "I demand tangible answers," he insisted. The stranger let out a sigh, hesitating. "You're closer to the truth than you think. But there are some things it's better to keep hidden." he muttered before walking away. Sensing pressure from all sides, Mark finally confronted Emily with all the evidence he had collected. He couldn't keep the issues hidden any longer. One evening, after another tense dinner, Mark laid out photos, bank statements, and recordings on the table. "Emily, I need to understand what's really going on," he said, keeping his voice steady even in the face of inner turmoil. Emily remained still, her eyes wide with surprise, before anger swept across her face. She responds with surprise and anger, denying any wrongdoing and accusing Mark of invading her privacy. "How dare you go through my belongings?" Emily's voice shook with anger. "Look at all this. You have no right to watch me like that." Mark remained resolute, desperation taking over his tone. "Emily, I needed to find out what you were hiding." He gestured to the evaluations. "I have the right to know the truth." The argument escalates until Emily breaks down in tears, acknowledging her hidden behavior, but refusing to explain why. "I can't believe you don't trust me," she exclaims, her eyes brimming with tears. "Tell me, I had my reasons for hiding things from you, but I'm not a criminal." Mark felt his anger intensify. "So what are you trying to hide?" Emily collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "Mark, I can't." "I can't," she muttered, her voice shaking. Mark is more helpless and deceived than ever, about to discover a truth that could ruin their existence. He watched Emily break down in tears, feeling the burden of his own helplessness. The woman he loved was an enigma, shrouded in secrets he had difficulty understanding. Mark's mind raced, searching for any clues that might have escaped him. As he stood there, he realized that the answers he was looking for were located in their house. When the tension reaches its peak, Mark chooses to examine Emily's secret files one last time, determined to uncover the absolute truth. Waiting for Emily to go to sleep, he discreetly entered her office. Methodically, he carefully went through drawers, folders, and files. Every document he found was a possible clue. Desperation drove his search, and as he delved deeper, he realized that he was close to discovering something of great magnitude. Mark finds a hidden diary in the back of Emily's closet, containing details of years of secrets she has tried to keep from him. The diary was hidden among worn clothes and boxes, and its appearance was almost coincidental. Mark felt his hands tremble as he took out the book and flipped through the pages. Each gate was decorated with meticulous writing and dates covering the entire event. He felt his heart beat faster as he read the first few lines, which described devastating truths. The diary indicates that Emily has been receiving considerable amounts of money to keep Mark out of the loop about their real relationship. Emily was paid to sustain the illusion with a clone. According to the records, the real Mark disappeared years ago in enigmatic events. As I read more, I got sicker. The life I experienced was an act, planned almost from the beginning. When Mark closed the diary, his hands were shaking. The diary indicates that Mark is not her husband, but a fake. The real Mark disappeared years ago in enigmatic events. Every word Emily wrote was a blow to his heart. Had his entire existence been a mistake? He examined the documents, each page confirming his greatest fears. His mind churned, unable to grasp the magnitude of the scenario. Mark experienced a deep sense of betrayal, perceiving himself as an unwitting participant in Emily's plan. Emily was paid to support the lie. The diary recorded all the transactions, noting all the payments she received to support the fraud. The magnitude of the error was remarkable. The presumed passion and the life they had built together were sustained by money and falsehoods. As he turned the pages, Mark's hands trembled, each note a painful reminder of the years he had been deceived. The discovery broke his heart, leaving him breathless. The surprise of this discovery made Marco stumble. He fell backwards, struggling to stay on his feet. As he clutched the diary to his chest, the room spun around him. His thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and anger. Could the real Mark still be alive somewhere? Did anyone else know about it? The structures of his reality collapsed, leaving him immersed in a devastating state of disbelief and sadness. Every memory felt like a bitter falsehood. Before he could confront Emily with the truth, her children discovered the diary, clearing up the riddle that made them call 911. They found the diary carelessly on the kitchen table. Panic set in, and they quickly dialed 112. When they read the pages, their faces turned pale with astonishment and bewilderment. Mark barely wrote down his actions, still shaken by the devastating betrayal. The sound of sirens filled the room, transporting him back to the present moment. The children despaired at the discovery and phoned 112 for help. As they recounted the details to the operator, their voices trembled, exposing the disturbing contents of Emily's diary. The gravity of the truth dismantled the idea of family and trust. Tears streamed down their faces as they hugged each other for protection. The betrayal was a wound too deep to comprehend, requiring immediate action. Assistance was being provided. The reality of their disintegrating lives was sinking in. The police arrived to examine the surprising discoveries made that day. The house was quickly filled with officers, each of whom examined the diary and other evidence in detail. Mark remained sitting on the sofa, indifferent to the questions. Emily stayed away, her face covered by an elaborate mask of terror. The little ones murmured amongst themselves, with fear and confusion obscuring their expressions. The atmosphere was filled with tension as the law enforcement officials began to piece together this bizarre and tragic puzzle. Mark is taken in for questioning, trying to piece together the disintegrating parts of the story. At the police station, the officers asked him detailed questions, seeking to understand the contents of the diary. Mark shared his life with Emily, his hidden behavior, and his recent discoveries. His voice broke several times, the anguish of betrayal clear. The agents listened carefully, each detail enriching the complex narrative. Gradually, they began to understand the distorted reality in which Mark had lived for years. He describes his journey to regain his sight and discover disturbing truths. Mark, sitting in the interrogation room, recounted how regaining his sight led him to a series of disturbing discoveries. The curtains, the phone calls, the hidden encounters, everything led up to this moment. The agents recorded information with their pens while Mark spoke. His expectation was that the disclosure of his story would finally provide a sense of justice and an end to this fantastic nightmare. The authorities set about solving the riddle of the real Mark's disappearance. By analyzing old documents and new evidence, they found clues that indicated events long forgotten. Mark looked on from afar, his heart heavy with fear. Conversations with friends and forensic evaluations of documents gradually revealed a clearer picture. Each new piece of information only intensified the mystery of what had happened to the real Mark. The road to solving the case was long and tortuous. The conclusion is reached when the complex web of deceit is finally unraveled, exposing long-hidden secrets. The real story of Mark's disappearance is unraveled. A failed illegal action and a desperate effort to safeguard family secrets. Emily's role, although morally dubious, was deeply rooted in misguided loyalty and fear. At the heart of the problem was an uncomfortable truth, finally revealed. Mark experienced bitter relief. The answers had arrived, but at great personal cost.